All right. Hi, guys. Okay. Well, welcome to the RegiCast. I'm your host, Reginald. Joining me is Simon. So, hey, Simon.
Hey man, how you doing?
Good, man. Doing really well. So, let's get right into it, guys. As you know, all of the relevant stuff's in the description. I'm not even going to, just go ahead and consume that. And we're just going to go ahead and get started. So, as is tradition, let's go ahead and get started with the first impressions. So, I'm curious to hear yours. I haven't even heard yours yet. And then I'll
Yeah,
share.
so I mean, I totally hit you up for the purpose of self, shameless plugging myself, basically. But
Yeah.
you're a Sleep Forth EP, and it's like some of the ways that you've handled the organization with this going forward. Just the way that we've structured doing all this, it's very very OI, and it's like I don't know if that's just because you've had this like goal and whatnot, but you're very different than I was expecting someone of Philip DeFranco's type to be.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. I mean, you've been complimenting me on that a few times, so I appreciate that. It's just, I'm trying. I think I'm slowly trying to like master sleep in a weird way. Like it's like a weird obsession I have right now. So yeah, thank you. My first impression is actually kind of simple. Like I think the initial first impression was from the Facebook groups where it's like I saw you were posting about like dating and relationships.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, I saw like some of the reactions, and they were varied. It's not like they were all negative, all positive. I just okay, this is interesting. It is a topic that some people get really touchy on. But I was like,
Mhm.
okay, this is but I definitely was expecting like like someone who was a little bit more callous towards for example, women or whatever. And
Mhm.
when speaking with you, hopefully you don't surprise me in a negative way, but speaking with you seems super respectful. You seem like a super respectful dude. Definitely, and especially backstage, like very good with like effie, just kind of making sure I feel comfortable and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, this is really I appreciate that. Because that's not always the case. Trust me. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
so, and we were actually just talking backstage about the hero's journey, which I'm like, okay, so you definitely have a head on your shoulders, but
Thank
you're
you.
processing things that at least I feel are important. And you seem to have a good character on top of that. So I was like, okay, you know,
Thank you. Means a
let's
lot.
yeah, let's make it happen. Now you're gonna have to help me out because to be fair, some of these topics are gonna still be we need to kind of ease some people into these. Uh,
Absolutely.
So how would you like to start? Let's actually go at your pace.
Oh man. So I guess just like what I do,
Yeah.
probably the most direct approach. So basically, I run a YouTube channel. I also can't talk, but I have a YouTube channel where I talk about relationships. What I actually do very specifically. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of that. Is it's like I study pickup artists and other dating coaches, and I under the assumption that everyone is out there preaching their saviors. I'm actually breaking down what they're teaching and trying to then understand it and relate it back to OPS and understanding, okay, so how can I get someone of more or less any OPS type to then have to then be able to maximize their results with the opposite sex, same sex, whatever. I will go ahead and say, for the sake of my own energy expenditure, in my videos, I normally talk very gender neutral because I want my ideas to be accessible for everyone. Um, just for the sake of preserving my own energy, just understand what I'm talking about applies to both men and women. But because I am a male who likes women, I'm going to refer to talking to girls. That's how the
Okay.
verbiage I'm going to use.
Okay. No problem. All right. So okay. So that's what you do, and if you please send me that YouTube link if you haven't already, so I can put it in the description when we're done.
Hmm.
So I'll make sure that that's in there. So yeah.
Cool.
So I think with that being said, I think we quite frankly have to kind of address like the FE, elephants in the room, right? So it's like, for example, the whole concept of pickup artistry is kind of, contentious,
Mhm.
as well as, like, for example, this whole notion of manipulation and you're trying to, get coerce people to do certain things. So I kind of wanted you to address that before
Mhm.
we kind of get into the systems themselves.
Yeah, so basically the term pickup artist itself is very interesting. It's in of itself, it's not like super stigmatized because, pickup artist or anything like it's not stigmatized in of itself just because it's called pickup artistry. And we can find evidence of that, like if you look at martial arts, literally like the art of like murdering people. We don't have that stigma there.
Right.
With pickup artistry, we do have that stigma because of a very specific subset of media attention and spotlight that has been shined on it from shows like The Pickup Artist, starring Eric von Markovic, or Mystery.
Okay.
And has done a wonderful job of being some sort of NFJ who is so bad in the ST that it actually comes back to bite him in the ass and ruin the NF perception of what he was trying to teach to begin with. Regarding manipulation, right? I guess before I get into that, the pickup artist community in general, it's a very amoral thing. It doesn't really have an ethics one way or the other.
Okay.
It's kind of like I used the analogy to martial arts earlier, where it's like it's the art of murdering people, but you can take that information and you can go out and murder people, or you can practice things like self-defense and all this other stuff. So
Right.
you can use pickup artist techniques to cultivate a loving sense of with women and all this stuff, or you can be a little bit more of a scumbag with it. And let me tell you, from a practical standpoint, being a scumbag will bite you in the ass with this. So
Okay.
as far as manipulation is concerned, I have a lot to say on the word manipulation. I actually did an entire YouTube video about it. It's on my channel. It's called is pickup manipulative? And I lay out the arguments that more or less the word manipulation is a word that a lot of people use to avoid being responsible for their own actions. Right? So it's like if you're always trying to get something from an interaction, and so you're always trying to get something from an interaction. And if we understand this, then we understand that I have something that I want and you have something that you want. If those two things are not in line, if we don't, consent to the terms and conditions of each other's presence, more or less, of the interaction, and if we don't align what our desires are mutually, then what happens is one of us is going to come away from that getting what we want and the other won't. And the other, who failed to negotiate properly, is going to feel that they've been manipulated by the other person. And the other, the word manipulation is just kind of it's cause for blame,
Right. So, and hopefully I'm going to try blasting back. I'm going to try it this time. So
Yeah.
It's almost as though what you're claiming is people would only accuse someone of being manipulative if they didn't get what they wanted. If they got what they wanted, they would not have made that claim, is what you're saying.
Yeah. If everyone went through their lives getting exactly what they wanted out of their interactions, they would never claim to have ever been manipulated, ever.
Okay. Cool. I'm trying to think, was there anything? Oh, there was one last major point that you wanted to address prior to kind of going to the systems themselves. You mentioned there was kind of this notion of one of the pieces of feedback you get commonly is this only would work on a certain type of person. So I don't know if you want to elaborate.
Yeah. So I've had conversations with people, and I've seen it in comment sections and whatnot, where a very common thing that I usually see women saying this, frankly, and this makes sense because women are generally the recipients of what would be, pickup, because pickup is more kind of a male-dominated space. That's not to say that there aren't female PUAs. There are, but they're kind of few and far between. But the issue with this idea of that would never work on me is hold on there. For one, it's you're not conscious of the game. And it's you're seeing this, and it's almost traumatizing, where in Dave and Chan's kind of terms, where it's almost traumatizing to think that your values your identity, who you are, your actions can be moved in that kind of a way. But then also, there's also kind of like, there's a little bit of misogyny to it when you start saying that, oh, that would only work on a specific type of girl, right? And it's like,
Okay.
all of the women that I've ever been with would, if upon hearing that would only work on a specific type of girl, I'm sure that all of them would be dying to know exactly what kind of girl that is.
Okay.
You know, because there's obviously, from the perspective of the person saying that, it may not be super intentional, but there's a little bit of a degradation happening there. There seems to be like, there's like an implication that the girl is stupid. Maybe they're desperate, you know, maybe they've got, you know, their own baggage that they're working through. And it's like, that's not a healthy way to look at people. And I think it's important that when we are trying to, you know, for one, try not to deflect this, you know, this onto others. But if we do make statements like that, maybe be a little bit careful about how, about what the implications of those words are.
Okay. So here's what we're gonna do. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna go through the systems. You're basically gonna just explain them to me, right? Just assume I don't even get girls. Okay, let's get past that.
Yeah,
so you're gonna have to help me out. Okay.
Okay.
So go ahead and share the systems.
Okay.
If anyone has questions, we'll kind of go through during the Q&A section. But then what I'd love to do, because you know a majority of my audience is from the OP community, we'll then kind of actually take a step back and then look at, okay, how is your type, like, you know, playing out in these systems that you're like, why is your type interested in these systems, and so on, right?
Okay.
And so from there, you know, if we have time, I'd love to go into the hero's journey, but you know, that's if we have time. Okay.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and actually get started. I know you actually have several systems, including an OP. There's the relationship dynamics, the social impact, and so on. So like, kind of just start where you want to start, and we'll just kind of get going.
Okay, so I guess the first thing that really pops out to me is that there is as I've been studying OP, and I've been in this for like 3 years. You know, I've known my type for over 2 years now, and what I've been noticing as I've been looking more and more into other pickup artists and into what they're talking about, I'm seeing that relationship dynamics are actually breaking down into for some of them, I wouldn't quite call them like binary coins. I feel like it's a little bit too messy to quite call them perfectly dichotomous, at least the way I understand them right now. With the, you know, there's, because you got the escalation and then you've got partnership and servitude. I'll talk about partnership and servitude a little bit here, because partnership and servitude, basically the concept is, it's like if you have two people that form a relationship of any kind, what actually happens is, if they have the same decider functions, right? So if they're both on the same decider axis, so if they both have TI and FE in their stack, what they'll end up doing is they'll partner up. They're doing they'll do the TI, they'll do the sleep processing together, they'll do the literally play testing is what I call it recently. They'll do all of that like together. It's like the energy coins are in balance, right? Whereas with a servitude relationship, it's like, what I've noticed, and this goes back to a couple of the friendships that I've had. I was best friends with a guy who was, to my best estimation, double masculine, TESI, blast, sleep, play. And, you know, best friends with this guy for 7 years. And, you know, his highest aspiration in life was to work under me in whatever entrepreneurial venture I took. And then my most recent, you know, typing partner that I've had, she's officially typed as double masculine, NEFI, consume, play, blast. And she would, what she would do is she would actually end up offering up her TE to work for my TI, you know?
Okay.
And so I'm noticing that the role of it relates to consume and blast more or less is kind of what's happening here. Is it's like it's fairly obvious to think about where the consume is fed by blast and blast exists to feed consume, right? So if we think about like a fast food analogy, Burger King is producing the same product, the same burgers and whatnot, just in a mass production line to as many customers as they can. However, I as a customer, I have the option. I can choose. I can go to Burger King. I can go to Taco Bell. I can go to Hardee's. I can go to Carl Jr. You get the idea there. So, and there's also some other interesting things that happen there with like the nature of information transfer. I won't get into that too much because that's a little bit long-winded.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
So there's that. I've noticed that it does break down into a binary coin that way, and those also break down into subcoins where it's like there's direct partnership, which is what Dave and Shan have, which so they have the same functions, like all four. They're in the same quadra. And then the other one, I don't know if it's I don't know what a good word for it is yet. The best one that TI comes to mind is like mutagenic, but like that sounds a little bit fucking weird. Where they're still partnering together, but they're coming away from it with different understandings of the information. From the partnership. And likewise with the servitude, you have direct servitude, and then you get the idea from there.
So yeah, the second one's almost like an alliance. I've been watching like a lot of Game of Thrones, so my SI is going to be very Game of Thrones heavy right now. It's almost like an alliance where it's like you're literally seeing different maps of the world, but you guys happen to align on decisions. Is what it sounds like with the second version. Right? So it's like a temporary alliance where it's like you cross paths and then you go away, and then you cross paths and you go away, and that happens quite frequently.
And I will give like a little bit of warning, just some personal growth stuff. The servitude dynamic, it's a really slippery slope, right? Especially because my friendship with the other guy who was TE first, this was all before I got into OP. The relationship completely fell through before I got into OP, and like so he was TE first, and he's constantly in a savior state feeding my TI, trying to make things work for me to my specifications. But then my FE fourth, I never felt responsible to ensure that he was happy with that arrangement. And so what happened over time was he developed in his FI, resentment over time, and that eventually blew up really hard. Over what at the time I thought was some petty shit, and then I go back and I think about my own behavior, and I'm like, nah, fuck, I was a dick, you know?
So I actually had a question though before we go too deep into that. Like, so going back to the the what do you call them, servitude relationships?
Servitude, yeah.
Is it only that direction? Like what about for someone with, let's say, FI consume and FE blast? Like, do you see that happening as well?
Absolutely. So my job as someone who has FE is to serve the FI of others. I exist in order to, like, yes, I have to get my TI needs met, and I have to make my goals and my aspirations happen. But on the back end of that, what I have to then be doing in equal measure is then I have to be, it's like a worker's relationship with a company, right? It's like where you've got like the big corporation is the TI. I've actually used the big corporation analogy for TI in the past before I even thought about all of this. But then the FE is then making sure that the workplace is hospitable, making sure everyone's happy going to work, making sure everyone's satisfied with the arrangements. Whereas that's the give and take. So on one hand, the TE is delivering results to the TI, where the FE is delivering happiness and making sure there's satisfaction and all that and it's going to sound a little bit lopsided because I am TI first, you know, so don't get me wrong there. It is going to sound very, but when you go and you listen to Gary V, and I can actually demonstrate. I actually realized this was a very interesting thing, very interesting aha moment for me, was I realized that every single person who has a TI in their stack has a sort of transactional view of relationships. Everyone. So it's like being truly close to someone who has TI means being useful to them in some capacity.
Okay.
It's a little bit it's difficult for me to put in a way that like effie doesn't sound horrible.
Yeah.
But that's, if you look at Gary Vee, again, somebody who has FE at the top, he did a couple videos talking about like move in with a bunch of guys and meet a whole bunch of people and all this other stuff. And it's like the point of meeting people is not to just make friends with everybody. The point of meeting people is to find people that'll be willing collaborators with you, who will be of use to you, and you'll build friendships on that usefulness. And that's what it is. So yeah, it's a very interesting.
And it's funny, like, so hopefully this is not a tangent, like, because I know Gary Vee quite a bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
As some of you guys know. The flip side is absolutely true, because he will then say, yes, you're being useful, but he will basically say, my role in life is to empower you to do your FI, basically. He's like, I want to empower you to pursue your passion. So it does go back around, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, he's like, look, it's like, if you need to use me as your DE excuse to do what you want emotionally, then go for it, right? So it's it does fit. Yeah.
That's something I've been observing over a long period of time, and I've been like checking a whole bunch of little things, trying to get feedback from Dave and Shan. They didn't give me too much, but like they did tell me they were happy that I was processing the stuff for myself. So I'm like, that's close enough. I'll consider that validation.
Right? Yeah, you can never tell, Okay, so all right, so we have that basic dynamic. So that's partnership and servitude. Now, related to that, there was the forms of escalation. You said those were binaries.
Yeah.
Did you want to get into that, or did you want to set something else up before you go?
Yeah, I'll get right into that. That's a really interesting thing, and that's not. I'm not going to even pretend to take credit for this one. This was actually discovered by somebody in the pickup community, a very prolific guy, Todd Valentine, or Todd V, who he's some sort of, I think he's SITI, and he confirmed SI, but like I think he's SITI. And what he talks about, he used to have a video up about this. It's no longer available, but he used to talk about like you've got these 4 forms of escalation. Now he wasn't breaking them down into binary coins, but you've got verbal and you have physical escalation, right? Okay. And among those, verbal escalation, there's 2 kinds of verbal escalation. There is topical escalation. So since I'm this can apply to basically everything, but since I'm the resident pickup guy of the Facebook groups, I'll use it in that context. So if I'm at a bar and I'm trying to pull a girl home, for good times, if I'm trying to do that, if I'm trying to, I'm sorry, it's just kind of awkward to say it like that.
It's just demon feeling, man. It's okay.
Yeah. So if I'm trying to pull a girl home for consensual sex in the missionary position for the sole purpose of procreation, then what happens is
very Christian. Yeah.
What happens is I have to move the top. So I've got topical verbal escalation, which is like I'm moving the topic into the direction of sex, right? So it's like I will start talking about sexual things. I'll move the conversation in that direction. And then the other form of verbal escalation is you will usually start out a conversation, if you're doing this right anyway, you will usually start a conversation with like me, I, you kind of language, and then you're actually progressing into, you're progressing from the narrative of us as 2 separate people into a narrative of us as one. So you'll start using more we language as the interaction goes on. Yeah. With physical escalation, and again, this works for basically everything. I'm going to even includes fucking like hostile interactions between humans. But between physical escalation, there's literal like tactile, as in like you are escalating in touching the person and getting physical rapport. getting the other person used to your touch, and then being used to the other person touching you. And then there is also logistical escalation, which is actually, again, if I'm trying to pull someone home for, butt stuff, then what happens is if logistical escalation would actually be taking that person and pulling them, taking them closer to the location wherein that would occur.
Yes.
Right. So that's kind of how that works. It's a little bit messy to call it perfect binaries, but in my experience, it is very difficult to do both kinds of verbal escalation at the same time properly, and it's also very difficult to do both kinds of physical escalation properly, because if you're not going to want to be touching someone, touching up on someone for the first time while you're walking from location to location. Slow down. You're going to freak people out doing shit like that. But yeah, that's how that works, more or less.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, man, I don't even know what to say. Okay, that was just So what I'm processing, we have to pause here. What I'm processing, I think I'm gonna just shift this to OP processing for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
The logic of it is so sound. I'm like, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. How the effie where.
Yeah.
How when you deliver this I guess I don't even know how to talk. See, I'm like, how are you getting away with talking like this?
Mm-hmm.
I guess so. My question would be from an OP perspective, and then we'll go back. Is when you're kind of talking about this to people, how are you I don't know how to word it. How are you framing it so that it's more effie accepted? I guess.
Well, effie is big on context, right?
Yeah.
So we're in the context of I'm talking to you in a StreamYard call, whereas there's a very different context where if I was talking in your ear and trying to get you to approach girls at a club, I can say exactly the same things, but because I'm in a different area, the context shifts, and all of a sudden what's appropriate in one location may not necessarily be appropriate in another location. And it's I'm getting away with it because I'm specifically being asked about it and I'm sharing my ideas, but I'm still going to, it's still going to come off as a little bit, just because it's this is not, club interactions or anything like that.
Okay, so that makes sense. So for you, but okay, so going back to the system itself, for you, this is a very universal, as you mentioned, this is something that applies in all contexts. I mean, other than in the pickup, let's stick with the pickup space. In the pickup space, which escalation do people tend to prefer, or is it just kind of based on type? Is it based on just individuals? Have you noticed a pattern there?
I have noticed a couple patterns, but I don't have them ingrained well enough at the moment to be able to. I'd have to, because what I plan on doing with my own business model is actually typing clients, and then watching them very closely and figuring out okay, so what are they naturally inclined to do? What are they?
Right.
I do have some thought is it's people get so caught up in the saying the right things, and building attraction, and they kind of forget things people usually will actually just forget about physical escalation in general, more so logistical escalation. And that's, which is funny because it's logistical escalation should be the one that people focus on the most, right? If the goal is truly to just have sex with as many people as possible, then logistical escalation should be the thing that people focus on the most, because it's if you're not there with her at the end of the night, she's not going to go home with you, right?
Right.
So it's but then again, I don't think the way that I perceive this, the main objective, at least for myself, is not to get as much pussy as possible. It's really just I've got my own reasons for being into this.
That's good. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. And we'll talk about that reason. I think it's actually a really honorable reason at the end. But okay, so moving my demon F feelings aside, let's go to the next topic. Let's channel change before I make it more awkward than it needs to be.
You're good.
This one's actually pretty good. So the next kind of system you have in place is kind of the circumstantial differences between men and women specifically.
Hmm.
When it comes to
Yeah.
just pickup artistry in general. I don't know if you want to jump into that.
Yeah, so this is something that I get into I used to get into a lot of arguments about it anyway. I'm trying to dial back my argumentative ass. But basically, the pickup community at large is very closely related to the so-called red pill community.
Yeah.
And the red pill community, while they have some points, while they have some fair points, there's a lot of harmful ideas that can come from some of the stuff that they talk about, and a good example of that is this whole thing about there's a lot of ascribing circumstantial behavioral things to like some sort of like evolutionary psychology, despite there not being any actual evidence to back up what they're saying. So one thing is like let's talk about like hypergamy. Hypergamy is a really good example of what I'm talking about here. So for those of you who are not familiar, hypergamy is basically just the smart way of saying dating up, right? So dating someone who is like above you in status, in all this other shit. And now if you look at Tinder swiping statistics, right? If you look at Tinder swiping statistics, then you actually will find that 80% of women are swiping right on the same 20% of men, right? And that's an example of hypergamy. That's what that is. Whereas with men, the swiping patterns tend to be like it's more 50-50. Whereas with women, they do tend to be going after the same like top 20% of guys. So that actually raises some interesting things. So it's like the red pill community is like, oh, it's evolutionary. Women are designed to. It's like no. Slow down, because because for one, there's not really any evidence to support that. The only evidence that they have to support it is that hypergamy happens and that it exists. But there's nothing tying that to evolution necessarily, at least in the way that they're saying that it does. So what ends up happening is you've got the stereotype about like filthy rich people having expensive taste for like food.
Yes.
Yeah, so what naturally happens in humans is, this is a circumstantial thing that occurs, is that greater access to a thing causes you to have higher standards for the quality of that thing. Right?
Yeah. That's true, yeah.
Women in general, because of just human dating patterns, women generally have a very abundant access to sex, right? That's why it is that pickup isn't really hitting so well for women as like a market, because women don't really have that as the trouble. I was talking to, I think it was Rose I was talking about this with, where the idea was that women get rejected on the sort of back end, whereas men get rejected kind of up front. Whereas like what the struggle that men have in dating is getting their foot in the door, so to speak. It's getting that initial attraction. It's getting that initial click. Whether sex happens or not, that's where men are struggling. And so it's like men have significantly less access to sex, whereas women, if they wanted it, they could pretty much go out and just pull, like literally as easy as going into your kitchen and making yourself a sandwich. It's not that difficult.
Yeah.
And so, but the reason I say that this is a circumstantial thing is because as I've become more sexually abundant, as I've increased my head count and my access to sex through going out and constantly meeting new people, what I learned is that I actually started to demonstrate hypergamous tendencies. My standards for women started to go up.
Mm.
And in much the same way. And likewise, I've noticed, I've had women in my life who didn't have that same like access to sex in the same way, and they likewise, predictably, did not display those hypergamous tendencies.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I mean when I'm talking about the social impact of sexual abundance versus sexual scarcity. Is it's like you will actually choose your partners a little bit, and this is kind of where I think women could actually really benefit from this stuff and understanding a lot of this. Is it's like a lot of these same techniques that pickup artists teach. People don't realize this, but Matthew Hussey learned everything that he knows from RSD, right? Matthew Hussey is a women's dating coach. He's the British guy who's the same type as Darren Brown.
Okay.
He's a women's dating coach, and RSD is the company that is run by Owen Cook. And Owen Cook, in my opinion, is probably one of the most prolific or at least he used to be one of the most prolific pickup guys in the community. Probably the most prolific one. So Matthew Hussey learned literally all of his, women's dating stuff from pickup artists. And he just copy pastes the material for women. Just gives them a different circumstance because they're trying to avoid the rejection on the back end, which what women tend to struggle with is the long game of like keeping a quality guy.
Mm-hmm.
That's the issue.
That's the issue. Well, there you go. I don't know if I have any questions on that. Okay, so the TLDR is so hypergamy, these kind of for lack of a better term, rumors about hypergamy is you're saying it's not founded on necessarily like evolution. Am I right in saying that?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's more along the lines of just the more you have access to something, the pickier you get because you have options. Right? It's like a supply and demand type of issue.
Which you can tie that to evolution if you want, but it's not as direct. And the reason why I don't like the whole evolutionary psychology take on it, for one, other than it not being ST accurate, right? There's no evidence to support that's the case. It also creates very nasty. If you watch any red pill videos on YouTube, it's a very nasty place to be. Genuinely very nasty place to be. I understand that a lot of those guys that talk about that stuff, they've been hurt and I get it. I've been there too. I understand. But those kinds of ideas that female nature and whatnot is to be hypergamous and, you're basically an incel if you're not 6 foot and don't have a huge dick or anything like that, all of that spawns resentment. Mm-hmm. And resentment is no, that is absolutely not what I'm here to advocate for. Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna have. I think there's another question that just jumped in based on that, so we'll kind of discuss that. Okay. But yeah, no, that's a really good call out. The last thing before we kind of fall back from the systems and kind of just talk about you as a person, finally, would be more like your intent with it, right? So it's you kind of, at least when we talked. You talked about how, and this actually is a cool transition to OP. It's you talked about how it's almost like your effie mission to use this to genuinely love everyone you're with, if that makes sense. So it's hopefully you can make that sound more effie than I just made it.
Yeah. So what happens, and I'm going to sound aggressively like a decider when I talk about this. So fair warning.
There you go.
What happens as your standards increase, right? As your standards go up, there's kind of a problem of we'll just assume that this is a bar of your standards, right? What ends up happening is as those standards go up, what naturally happens is that everyone who does not meet those standards, in your mind, you kind of dehumanize those people a little bit, right? I see this in women a lot. I see this in women a ton, and I see this in men who are very sexually active a ton, where it's they will go out of their way to show off to their friends how they rejected someone or how they it's like kind of like forgetting that other person's like still a human, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like for me in my own journey with this, I came from like a really abusive relationship, that if just the trauma from that, I was extremely paranoid and suicidally depressed. And if I didn't find pickup, you know, I'd be dead, you know? So it's like, that's kind of my mission. That's why I'm so damn passionate about it. But like
Mm-hmm.
with, what ends up happening is as it's so easy as you, you know, as you start, you know, increasing your access, to sex and, or whatever it is that you're trying to get, you start to kind of dehumanize people a little bit, and it becomes, it's kind of a slippery slope to just becoming a downright sociopath, or just being, or just becoming, you know, you're just looking for the next high. And I've seen people become, or not seen so much in person, but I've seen a lot of stories about people, becoming, you know, addicted to things like, you know, drugs and alcohol, and becoming very resentful and depressed, you know? So it's like, if you don't have access to sex and that's what's causing you to be unhappy in your life, then, you know, get access to sex for one. But like, once you do have access to sex, then you know, and this is where women, I think, could really learn a lot from this stuff, is it's like, you'll be a lot happier and people will be a lot happier with you in general, if you can then learn to just really, love and appreciate, and be a witness to the beauty that is other human beings in your life.
Yeah.
You know, even if they're, you know, dumb or whatever, you know, that's for me, like as a TI, like, yeah, even if they're stupid, I can still love them.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's like, if you spend too much time thinking about, and this is me like preaching my demons a little bit, the reverse will actually be true for people, for like your NFJs or NFPs. If you spend too much time thinking about, the ST, what's the right thing to say, then you aren't going to be, if you spend too much time thinking about that, the right thing to say or the right thing to do, then you're in your head, and you're not actually, appreciating the person sitting across the table from you. You're not actually, in a place of genuinely loving that person. Likewise, if you're NF or SF or whatever, if you're a feeler, then the problem will be like, yeah, you're in the moment, you're loving that person, but there are still correct things to do, in order to, maybe properly convey that love to the other person.
Right. All right. Yeah, that's and it's interesting. Like, it's that is. So when you told me that, I was like, oh, this is a very interesting, like, because you're an ISTP, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, this is very unconventional. Let's just put it that way.
Thank you.
Like,
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just that's a very very powerful, and to me very positive message, honestly. And for me personally, maybe this is my NE, but it's like I could definitely see how that applies beyond pickup or whatever. Like, it's like, you know, just, you know, social interaction just in general. You know, that's kind of the dynamic that I see.
Yeah.
Right. That I struggle with, you know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, really cool. So before we kind of start zooming out, is there anything else you wanted to say about the system specifically? I know a lot of this is on your YouTube channel, which we'll get the description for, but
I think I'm good right now in terms of, the systems and whatnot. We can move on.
Okay, cool. So we have about like 10-ish minutes before we start doing Q&A. So I mean, no, I actually have to ask you, like, what got you interested? So you said you were in like a down spot, but like, were you always like SEFE interested in relationships prior to this? Like how did you?
It's weird. It's weird. Like, you know, that old joke about, like, if you, like, you know, you, the joke of, like, you drank too much and then you stand up and you, like, suddenly regret every moment that brought you here. You know? every moment of my life, more or less, I can look back and I can actually pinpoint very specific moments that have developed very specific characteristics in me, at least for my type.
Yeah.
As my type has always been there. I can see how I've been ever since childhood. But like, my first girlfriend, I actually met her at the beach because I was homeschooled for a very long period of my childhood, life. And so I didn't exactly have peers, really. It was just kind of me and my parents at home for the most part. My mom took me and my little sister to this lake where close to where I live, and she looked at me, and I swear to God, I was like 14. I was like not even 14. I was like 13 years old, and it's like she looked at me and she said, "Go find yourself a woman." And I was like, "All right, guess
Okay.
I'm doing that. That is the job I have been given."
Yeah.
And so I actually did just that. I went and I started talking to people. I did, I guess, what I would now refer to as like an incidental approach, as opposed to a cold approach. So like a cold approach in the pickup community is like cold approach. It's just like with anything else, you just walk straight up to the person and you start talking to them. For me, it was just like I was digging off in the water, and I just kind of looked over and it's like, oh, there's people there. I'm going to start talking to them. There's a girl. Like there's one of those women people that my mom told me to go find myself one of. And so I started talking to her. We exchanged numbers, and she ended up being just very, very abusive in the long run. So like that wasn't terribly positive. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of it here because it is very, it's very fucked kind of how that went sour in the way that it did. And I spent about the better half of 2 years, kind of recovering from the emotional trauma of that relationship. And so, what was happening was over time, I was becoming more and more paranoid, more and more just scared of women in my life. And what eventually happened was I kind of realized, I was like, shit, if I kind of like realized, I was like, if I keep thinking this way, if I keep allowing myself to have these thoughts, what's going to happen is I'm going to kill myself at 15 years old. And like, what ended up happening from there was I remember I found this YouTube video from this channel. It's not up anymore, but you can probably still find the video if you search for it. But it was from this channel called Simple Pickup, and basically it was just these three guys who would go out and they would it was like really simplified PUA stuff. So what they would do is they would take like challenges to like go out and pick up girls. And the one that I stumbled across first was like Batman picks up girls. And it's this one guy, his name's Jesse, and he literally was dressed up in a Batman costume, like head to toe, like doing the Christian veiled voice, and running around this like college campus in the middle of like LA, and talking to girls, just being like, "You're cute," and then just like running off. It was just really just this really fun thing to watch. And that channel kind of, as I overconsumed the fuck out of that, it made me realize, like, wait, I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to be scared. I can learn to sort of rebuild that connection where trauma has been made. And it's like, I'm not going to go around, I'm not going to pretend that I'm not still a little bit fucked up from that, experience 10 years ago now. But like, holy shit, I'm a hell of a lot better off than where I was,
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got here. And then, eventually I found RSD, and I found I didn't find Owen at first. It was somebody who was working for Owen, named Julian Blanc, and Julian. This is going to connect into how the reason why I started taking interest in using OPS for this stuff was Julian. I resonated a lot with his ideas, right? And his like the way that he described being polarizing and all this other stuff. And then I found out about OPS, and like I immediately clicked it in my head, and I was like, "There's got to be something to this. There has to be patterns associated with personality type that are affecting the way that people are coming about." Because there's so many different angles that people take to come at this stuff, right? And then I ended up buying. I got myself typed, audio TISE, consume sleep blast. And then I actually did a coaching call with Shannon a while back where I asked her, I was like, "What? I know that you've typed Owen. What other pickup artists have you typed?" And she was like, "I've typed Julian. Julian is double feminine TISE, consume play blast. So he's only 2 clicks away from being my type. And because of that, it's because of that I resonated so much with what he had to say about the topic. Because we were speaking the same language, She mentioned, Todd, some kind of SI, and so on and so forth. And I was just like, okay. And that's kind of when I decided, like, I'm really going to have to dig a hell of a hole here. This is going to be a one hell of a rabbit hole to uncover. And that's kind of just because of everything that I've been through and the fact that it saved my life. And I'm so fucking grateful to Dave and Shan. And I can't ever seem to express that enough, is that Dave and Shan, with OPS and getting and providing this information to me and working with me and talking to me through the emails, it's like, holy shit, like the amount of gratitude that I have for just them giving me like the specific direction that I needed is fucking unreal, and that was fucking huge for me. So yeah, that's how I got from A to Z.
Yeah. Wow. That's an intense story. That's a pretty intense story, That's cool though. So I think we're gonna just start transitioning to Q&A. Before I do that, is there anything you would want, like any final blast before we do the Q&A?
Yeah. So just one little thing. A lot of people think that like pickup stuff is like, you're being fake or you're not being genuine. And I just want to represent that based on everything that I've studied and all the pickup artists that I know that Shan has, Dave and Shan have both typed, and going through and studying their materials. Now, pickup is really just what people teach as far as pickup is concerned is really just their saviors. In other words, it's about as authentic as it gets. There is no there's no tricks or any of that. There's no brainwashing people. The simplest way that I can explain any of this is a quote from a guy that I've been looking into a lot recently. His name is Zan Perion. And he probably, if I had to explain his particular method, and I'm trying to adopt it into my own, is that a man who loves women is a man who is loved by women. It's his message is just like, you give compliments to women not because you want them to sleep with you, but because you are a witness to the beauty that women represent. And you're a man, and that's what you do. You give invitations out into the world, and you don't expect anything in return. And it's like, holy shit, dude. Like, if I sincerely believe that if people latched on to Zan more than they latched on to, like, if the media latched on to Zan Perion more than they latched on to Mystery, I think that the pickup community would be viewed in a much more positive light than it is.
Yeah. Okay, really good blast. I was not expecting that, but that was good. Okay, so, all right, so really appreciate it. So let's start transitioning to Q&A. We have a few questions, a few people in the chat. So really appreciate seeing you guys. The first question, or actually, I think all the questions actually are from Chinzia. Okay, so let me find this one. So, can you see the screen? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the question is, do you think it matters where the FE or TE is in the stack when it comes to whether a person is willing to serve the other person's DI?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where the servitude relationship can very quickly become. I kind of hinted at this before, where it's like the servitude relationship can become very imbalanced very quickly. Um,
Um,
it works out a little bit better if you have. I think the safest bet for it is if you have like two EJs, right? So like an ESFJ and an ESTJ. Um,
mhm.
so that they're constantly doing the savior function of like them serving the other person's um, their DI. I think that's probably the most balanced way naturally without actively thinking about this stuff, right? I think that
Right,
that's probably the most natural, but that's just a suspicion. I don't really have a whole lot of evidence to back that up. Me being a censor, I
right,
have to have proof for that. That's just speculation
right.
on my part, based on theory and understanding how demon functions work and all that.
Okay, it's good, good. Next one. This is more of a validation question, I could tell, Jinzia, but so in relation, I think you were just discussing how FETI users, they view people as useful, right? They measure their relationships as based on whether they're useful. So
Mhm.
it's like, so she mentioned this must be why FE has to be less deep than FI because you will have to let go of them if they're no longer useful, right? So I guess you want to validate that or qualify that?
I don't think that it's a matter of being less deep. I just think that it's a matter of because I feel emotions just about as I would say about as deeply as any other person. But the thing is, I'm using my emotions for different tools. So my
Mm,
emotions are tied to blast production as well as play, feedback. So I'm constantly, looking, and it's like I still hurt. I still have my personal emotions that I'm going to, but like the reason why the usefulness dynamic comes into play is because I'm responsible to be consumed choosy for my
yeah,
environment and in a decider way. We talked about this a little bit backstage, which is like there's like a decider or observer bend to like each of the animals. So it's like as a consume plus being a decider, I'm responsible then to make sure that the people that I spend my time with are up to the standards that I require. You
hmm,
know, choosing is based on access. So I don't think it's necessarily a depth issue. I think it's just a matter of different purposes.
okay, well, there you go. Next question from Chinzia again. Okay, so you see that women would benefit from what the pickup artist industry says. How would these techniques work when women's problems are at the back end versus up front?
Okay. So at the core of all of this, at the core of literally everything, the little anti-nucleus of all of dating and relationships, literally every single thing is just
Okay,
if if you want a partner, okay, define in your head what that partner is, okay, who like what are your standards for that partner? Do you as a woman, well, this is going to sound a little bit shallow, but this is just the some of the standards I've seen a lot of women just generally having.
okay,
He has to be taller than you, generally, preferably makes more money than you, um, preferably not, a disgusting, unhygienic, Jabba the Hutt looking ass piece of shit, right? Um, those kinds of things, you know. So it's like, okay, so you want this guy who makes more than you, is taller than you, preferably, decent enough looking. Um, what kind of woman? What kind of woman then is is that particular person after? What are the standards of your target audience, so to speak?
right,
And then you kind of reverse engineer. It's like, okay, well, that's what I need to become,
right,
right? If you need to something that I learned very heavily in the pickup stuff is it's like in order, like, yes, like marriage and all that, That's the end goal for a lot of people, including men that are in this. They want to find that one person. But for men, a big piece of advice that's given is that, like, in order to be the perfect person for that special someone, you need to be good with women in general, you know? And so it's like the same thing kind of applies. You need to understand what men want in a partner, and you need to understand through understanding what men want in a partner, you need to then be able to dissect what your specific ideal man is looking for in a partner, and then just embody that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And that solves both. It almost sounds like that solves both the back end and the upfront issue.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay, so there you go, Chinzia. There's the NI. The last question, at least the one that I see, is from Tanya. Hey, Tanya. Could you possibly explain how double observing feels like or works?
Okay, so that one actually depends on what axis you're on. So if you're SE-NI or any SI, right? So the way that I think about this stuff is it's like it's not necessarily that as a decider I am more able to go back and forth on my observations. It's not necessarily that I'm more able than an observer. It's just that I'm not really afraid to do it. My fear is in my decisions, but I don't really have fear in my observations. Does that make sense? So it's like the reason I say it depends on what axis that you're on is because both any SI and SI-NE are those are actually kind of the best way that I can think about it is it's like those are just two parts. The axis is the part, okay? And I think about this a lot with double deciding as well, where it's like, so something that I've observed, and this is much more recent, this may actually help you a good bit, Reggie, is the difference between SE-NI and any SI is that with the SE-NI is what's happening is the NI, what it's doing is it's forming a template, right? That no matter what sensory is there, it can just follow the same template, and that explains why it can look into the future, allegedly, right? Because it's like, oh, this is all just the same thing, just with it's all the same layout. It's all playing out pretty much the same way. So if this is in the same category, then I can trust that it'll play out in exactly the same way. So I can then predict that everything that's also in this category will also work that way. With SI and NE, and this was a huge aha moment for me recently, and I have Chintia to thank for that actually. Chintia, if you're still watching, love you to death. You're great. Chintia and Clara actually are the ones that helped me kind of realize this, is that what's happening with SI and NE is actually flowcharts, right?
Yeah, oh my God, yes.
Flowcharts. So
yes.
The SI is putting down the like, this is what it is. This is the answer for this step. And then the NE is then responsible to go around that bubble and then be like, okay, what if this, what if this, what if this, what if this? And the SI is then responsible to then fill in. So in a way, you can almost think of SI as being expansive. And I was watching your interview, Reggie, what's her name, Cherie, where you asked her about what SI organization is like. And she says, I'm not organized at all. It's like, you don't perceive it because your SI is expanding.
Okay.
Your SI is built to expand. That's what flowcharts do, is they go from one step to the next step. And then in preparation, they'll ask the NE, okay, what about this? And then they'll move to the next step, right? And especially if you have masculine NE, it'll be doing that a little bit more aggressively. So it's like, whereas NI might be able to predict the future, allegedly, right? Using a little bit like woo-woo kind of bullshit talk here for a second. Whereas NI might be able to like predict what's happening in the future or what will happen. I suspect that if the SI is given enough time, the SI can actually be better prepared for the future. Even if it may not be able to predict exactly what will happen, it can create the map and then be like, okay, so if this happens, I do this. If this happens, I do this. It always has contingencies. So the best way to explain double observing in the shortest possible terms is just think of the axes as one part each.
Okay. Wait, that was the whole sentence?
That was
one part. What do you? Sorry, one part each. Can you just clean that up a little bit? What do you mean?
Oh, sorry, one part per axis. So like SENI is one part, SINE is one part. And I talked about this with Shan a little bit on my channel, where it was like, I hit her with like a sort of a pre-developed version of that idea. It wasn't particularly. Hopefully, she watches these, and hi Shan, if you're watching. Hopefully, this explanation of it is a little bit more useful than what I spoke to you in the past about.
Okay. So any SI views planning or reality in terms of flowcharts, or creates flowcharts. Phrase it. NISE views things in terms of templates, and it essentially it tries to, for lack of a better terms, it gets so familiar with how things operate within that template that it just assumes that will always be the case, right? Which leads to the prediction. Yeah. No, that's really good. And just one passing comment, I will say that in my experience, with my SINE at the very least, I mistake NISE like templates for flowcharts sometimes.
Yeah, you and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we as humans fundamentally believe that everyone else is wired the same way that we are.
Yeah.
So the way that I think about like my decider problems as an IP, for instance, I'm worried, like I'm afraid of the tribe because I'm afraid the tribe's gonna fucking backstab me somehow, because I'm sure as hell like I'm the type of person that would backstab them. Like,
oh my god.
Being incredibly cynical here.
Yeah.
That's
the
default setting. That's how not to think.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I'm just listening to them, like, yeah, I guess they'll stab you, but they're, we'll get over it. It's fine. But okay, really good, man. So I think that's all the questions. So thank you, everyone. Especially Tanya and Jinzia. So Simon, please stay on. We'd love to kind of just decompress and stuff like that. But for everyone else, really appreciate it. Especially since it's Saturday. Look forward to another episode next week. And if you guys have any other questions, feel free to either go to Simon's channel. What's your channel name? Like the tag name?
Oh God, you're probably not going to be able to search it because I'm awful with YouTube algorithmic stuff. But my channel name is just my type.
Okay.
That's all it is. I refer to what I do as that's my type dating. It's terribly catchy, I know.
Yes.
But it's I'll give you a link so that you can put it in the description.
Thank you.
Pretty much post haste.
Okay, good. So be on the lookout for that. So either kind of message him that way, leave some comments, go subscribe to his channel, please. Or feel free to leave some comments here, and I can see how much we can address those questions or anything like that. Other than that, I think that's it. So everyone else, really appreciate you guys joining. And Simon, thank you so much. And I will
thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no problem, man. And I will see you all on the next one.